विक्रम देश सर,
नमस्कार।
नमस्कार। आप थोड़ा सा अपना वीडियो ठीक करना पड़ेगा आपको। आपका सिर्फ हमें फेस ऊपर से दिख रहा है, नीचे से कम दिख रहा है।
How do you feel it now?
आप सामने जो मॉनिटर है आपका लैपटॉप से आप जुड़े होंगे, तो थोड़ा सा आगे करिए सर।
Better?
हाँ, थोड़ा और करिए सर।
Is it better now?
Yes, it's better now. Now it's fine, sir. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yes, sir, it's fine. Saloni?
Yes, sir.
We can start now.
Okay, sir. On behalf of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, I, Saloni Saini, extend a very warm welcome to all in this week's Friday Dialogue. Friday Dialogue Lecture Series is the initiative of DG IIMC, Professor Dr. Sanjay Dwivedi, to offer out-of-classroom perspective to students on the issues which are normally not discussed in the classrooms. The topic of discussion for today is Amrit Kaal and the vision of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. To discuss this topic, we have with us Squadron Leader Vikram Deshji from Bangalore, DG IIMC, Professor Dr. Sanjay Dwivedi, who has been a constant guiding force behind all the endeavors being carried out at the IIMC, Dean Academics, Professor Govind Singh Ji, DSW and HOD Outreach Activities and Placements, Professor Dr. Pramod Kumar, and all faculty members, supporting staff, students across all courses and centers. All IIMC students have joined through their respective classrooms. IIMC has total 6 campuses. Apart from the New Delhi campus, we have a campus in Kottayam, Kerala, Amravati, Maharashtra, Dhenkanal, Odisha, Aizawl in Mizoram, and Jammu. I would now request Dr. Rachna Sharma, Course Director, Digital Media IIMC, to kindly welcome our today's guest, Squadron Leader Vikram Deshji. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Saloni. On behalf of IIMC, I extend a very warm welcome to the eminent speaker of this edition of the Friday Dialogue, War Veteran Squadron Leader Vikram Deshji. I take this opportunity to welcome DG IIMC Professor Sanjay Dwivedi, who envisioned this program. I welcome ADG Shri Ashish Goel, Dean Academics Professor Govind Singh, Dean Student Welfare and HOD Outreach Professor Pramod Kumar, all senior professors, regional directors, my colleagues, and all the students who have joined the session from the classrooms of regional centers in Kottayam, Aizawl, Jammu, Dhenkanal, Amravati, along with Delhi. The topic of today's session is Amrit Kaal and the vision of Subhas Chandra Bose. Undoubtedly, Netaji's ideas inspired the generations of the contemporary age, as he once said, quote, one individual may die for an idea, but that idea will, after his death, incarnate itself in 1,000 lives, unquote. Netaji, as a youth educator and journalist, always inspires us. Today, when we have entered into the Amrit Kaal of India's independence, and Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi gave us the Panch Sankalp of the Amrit Kaal for the coming 25 years to realize the true spirit of independence, we see how the vision of Netaji resonates in these resolutions. Be it the resolution of building the country into a developed nation, or the resolution in terms of self-reliance, when no trace of slavery should remain in any form, at any place, or in any moment in the country. We still recall when Netaji used to say, I'm quoting Netaji, never lose your faith in the destiny of India. There is no power on earth that can keep India in bondage, unquote. This hope in the country also leads us to the very third resolution, that we should be proud of our heritage. This was actually the dream of the nation builders when they asked for Swaraj, and also reflected in their efforts to achieve freedom. Again, I would say that Netaji, as a youth educator and journalist, always worked to achieve that through his newspaper Swaraj, and also through that Azad Hind radio that delivered the program in English, Hindi, Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, Gujarati, and Pashto during 1942. And even before, when we look at Netaji's life, we find it very interesting, because at the age of 24, he resigned from the civil services candidature to come to India in the year 1921 to take the call of his duty towards the nation. So that was the spirit to inspire the youth. We always find it there. And when it comes to the very fourth, for the fourth and fifth resolution, that there should be unity and solidarity, and the citizens should be dutiful, we take a clue from Netaji's Azad Hind Fauj. Netaji showed his faith in the youth and women of India especially, and always motivated them to become a part of it. So Azad Hind Fauj was one live example, I would say, of that spirit. It united the youth, filled them with discipline and the feeling towards the nation. Even today, when we talk about women emancipation, we see that how women regiment of Azad Hind Fauj, Rani of Jhansi regiment, and the stories and personal accounts coming in from the young lady officers of that regiment, be it Captain Lakshmi Sehgal or Mrs. M.B. Mehta. So we see that those tell us about the courageous spirit of Indian women. And this is just the glimpse of, to understand the vision for the Panch Sankalp of Amrit Kaal. But there is more to know about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and his vision, and what would be better than, who will be better than the person, who is who comes from the army background. He is himself an educationist and visionary. So we look forward to listen to and to know more about Netaji from the words of veteran squadron leader Vikram Deshji, who took part in 1971 Indo-Pak War. He is a educationist, because as an associate fellow, he conducted training programs. He's continuously working on the vision of Netaji through his initiatives of human development at the grassroots. He has been associated with value-based education and human development, history and philosophy of freedom struggle, coming from the freedom fighters and the leaders like Netaji himself. So, sir, we are delighted, we are honored to having you with us to deliver and to be a part of your shared vision, or say insight about the vision of Netaji. So on behalf of IMC, I welcome you, sir, and we are here to listen to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Rachna, you made my task easier by introducing Netaji in the way you have. Let me at the outset thank the Professor Dwivedi, the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, and the members who are attending this, and having given me an opportunity to share views about a great man who is not in the midst of us, who left us long years back, but he became part of an emotion which continues to live. And even today, we find that emotion is a moving force. When we talk about, especially the subject of today of what you call Amrit Kaal and Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, what is the relationship? What do we mean by this? And what is this Amrit Kaal all about? Well, in layman's term, it means an auspicious occasion to be able to start something noble. But as we have been using it, and as it's popularly known, it is the next 25 years from the 75 years of independence to 100 years of independence, and how we take this journey to become a Jagat Guru. So to become a Jagat Guru, it is in the process of becoming that is going to decide the tone and tenor of how India will stand and give directions to a tortured world in which we are living today. Before I proceed further, let me make a quotation from Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, where he says that reality was a spirit working through a conscious mind with a purpose through time and space. And perhaps that time has come now for us to examine, to understand, and to commit ourselves to a new India, to a new world order, which is very necessary at the moment. Amrit Kaal, when we talk about, we will have to take a look back through the medium of our freedom struggle, India's own freedom struggle, which was a struggle against the biggest colonialism of its time, and its success, and perhaps not so much of success, has ramifications for the world, which continues till date since 1947 and even before. Now, let me touch upon, since we are going to be talking about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and throwing light on the contemporary context, let me examine where do we find ourselves today. We are looking at, we are living in a world which is going through a war right away. We have seen what's happened in Syria. We are also watching what's happening in Ukraine-Russia war. We are also watching what's happening in our neighborhood, and we are seeing that there is no clear path which is visible. And therefore, it is important for us to be very cool-headed and look back at events since 1757, which will bring us to the present and take us to the future. Now, if you will recall, it was in the 1757. I'll take a few minutes to go through it so that we get the context and we get the order straight in which we will move. 1757 Battle of Plassey set the stamp of British imperialism on India, and for 100 years it was a very dragging slavery which we went through. Sometime in 1857, a new movement started taking place, but which was suppressed, and the British called it mutiny, but it was our first war of independence. And towards the end of 19th century, we have certain events that took place. One was emergence of spiritual leader like Paramhans, Ramakrishna Paramhans. We had Swami Vivekananda. We had youngsters who started working for a party known as Gadar Party, like Hardyal and other people who joined, and they started moving. The beginning of 20th century had seen a kind of a spiritual renaissance in India, and closely related with it was the freedom struggle as it was taking shape. Now, if you look back between the First World War, 1914, Second World War, 1938 to 45, many events crossed our minds and our experiences. 1914, sometime in sometime in 1897, 23rd January, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose was born. For us to be able to understand his vision and to be able to apply in the contemporary context, we will have to understand what are the influences that work on Netaji. Since his childhood, he was a bit of a loner, but he was attracted towards a kind of a search for an identity. And through the period of 1900 till about 1917 is marked by a crisis that came into his mind, a crisis of identity. He was very much influenced by Swami Vivekananda. He was very much influenced by a notion of Tyag of Ramakrishna Paramhans. And slowly he came around to be influenced by Shri Aurobindo, who was, of course, himself a combination of a freedom fighter who later on became a sage and gave a vision to the world which continues to be relevant till today. His critique of Sri Aurobindo's critique of Western civilization, the problems of the Western civilization and contradictions therein, and as we find the development of science which has taken place since then, the issues that have come up in the influence of, say, classical physics and quantum physics on society and its formulations have determined many things that we are experiencing today. Now, let me come back to where we are today, and there we will proceed with Amrit Kaal. Well, you see, humankind has faced paradoxes through the ages, but the kind of it which faces today are of a different order and enormity. To be able to look at it, we have to examine the possibilities that are there. The ones it faces today are of a different order. We have the problem of a nuclear winter gazing at us, and we have an ecological failure which can render life on this planet and its possibility thereafter. But if we look back, science was to be the language of freedom, and technological progress held out great promise of maximum happiness for the largest number. But that has not come true. That promise has failed us. Neither the ideologies that were evolving through the 20th century, nor the other endeavors that took place, mainly influenced by the West, have not shown us a great path. In fact, we are finding ourselves in the midst of violence, which has become the centerpiece of our life today. And we find that we have in the midst of us a failure of minds at the helm of affairs. And as we have seen, alliances, pacts, and treaties are made, and peace is held at ransom. This is a very serious problem that we are facing today. And how do we negotiate it? What will be the task that India will have to do? How do we proceed from now till say 2047? It is in this context that we need to understand who are the players and in our freedom struggle who stand out and show us a path. And it is in this context that I would like to bring you the vision of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, born in Cuttack, influenced in the earlier years, as I mentioned, by Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo, and his quest for finding an anchor on which he could hang his life, and which is very evident from the books that he wrote later on, India's Struggle and India Pilgrim, and he calls himself a pilgrim for the freedom of motherland. In that, there are certain issues that we need to understand. He's going to his study, he was a good student, a student of philosophy, and he did do extremely well in his education. His earlier influences which took place in Calcutta in terms of his college days, and then coming through and working in military, territorial army, he joined, and he found a great identity in wearing a uniform and feeling that he had a sense of power. All these things went to influence him in later life. But the most important thing about him is that when he was sent to study abroad in England, he did exceedingly well. And he was also preparing for IAS. He appeared for IAS and stood fourth. But there comes the conflict. And the conflict of a young man, conflict of a youth, which is called the crisis of identity. It may be interesting to note that Erikson, the psychohistorian who wrote about Gandhi's truth, how would he have examined Netaji? Because Erikson also wrote Youth and the Crisis of Identity. This is a stage. This is a formational stage of every young man and woman. And I'm sure a large number of you whom I can see sitting in the classroom and on the screen have go through this crisis of identity and try to figure out where am I to go, who am I? And these are the questions that came to the mind of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. And it is with this in mind that he chose to be part of the freedom struggle, and he returned back to India. A lot of dismay to the family members and other people, but that is how Netaji was formed. And his first meeting in 1921 was with Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji, as you know, had come back to India around 1915 and 16 with a new idea of civil disobedience and satyagraha. But when Netaji met him, it is interesting that he had a lot of questions which a young man would have, and he was not very very pleased with the answers he got. And from there he went he was asked by Bapu to go to Calcutta and work with C.R. Das. Those are some of the events which he worked, but he was never comfortable with the civil disobedience movement. And he started discovering that every time it suited the British that you have a freedom movement where you say that it's a non-cooperation, civil disobedience, and we will not be violent, and we will keep on taking the bayonets and beating, and you keep on exploiting us. He found this a very basic contradiction. Though he appreciated Mahatma Gandhi, he addressed him as Mahatma, but he found that his methods were not moving at a pace he expected it to move, and therefore there was a very serious limitation. He said this movement is not going to get us very far, and therefore this conflict stayed in his mind. He continued with Congress, and he continued with Congress through Congress itself was going through some internal changes, like from Dominion status, which was considered to be a real backwaters of a people of India, and a search for political independence. And he found some kind of camaraderie with Jawaharlal Nehru, who for quite some time, in fact, were comrades in hand, but later on they parted company because Netaji was a rebel, and Jawaharlal Nehru was much softer in his address in trying to mold the freedom movement. Now, one of the things that you need to understand is that whilst they both managed to bring about a complete independence as a charter, but what was it that was there in his mind with which he wanted to proceed further? Now, look, first thing that he had was that if India has to come on its own, then it must be complete independence. It must decide its own future. It must work out through its own ideals and ideals which has come to us from its civilizational values. And therefore, we must make sure that the British are out lock, stock, and barrel. But as you know, that this had very, very, very many ramifications. And in the party itself, in the country itself, he didn't have much support. But he said that I will move alone. In that, he traveled. He went to jail 11 times. He suffered a lot of problems in the jail with the British. British were tracking him because they knew, and the intelligence department had started writing about him, that here is a very dangerous person. Every time he was sent out of jail, they insisted that he goes out of the scene, and he went abroad. He was asked to go abroad. He went abroad a number of times, mostly to Europe, primarily to Europe in the beginning. Two things come out very clear. One is his sojourns in Europe, his interaction with Mussolini, his interaction with Hitler, and the dialogue that took place. Now, when we look at those dialogues and papers, what comes out of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose is that he was not apologetic. He was straight and upright. He wanted to have a clearer understanding of how we can participate with the enemy of our enemy. And then there is this thing which is said about him, that he was dealing with fascists, and he was working with excess power, and therefore it was some kind of a wrong that he was doing. But then the question arises, and we must take note of it. We were working with allied powers. I mean, it's what a contradiction it is that in the country we are saying we will not cooperate, non-cooperation, and yet we had in the First World War over 1 million soldiers, Indian soldiers, fighting a British war, spreading their imperialism. And in the Second World War, we had more than 2.5 million Indian soldiers fighting again for the British war. It was of no consequence whether it was Axis power or Allied power. As a matter of fact, the most important part was between the two of them, we had to decide how we are going to take India forward. And in that, we have to understand that Netaji showed and championed a cause which continues to give us direction even today. It is not as though he was a violent person. It is not that he was some kind of a terrorist. It is not that. he was a spiritual-minded person who took the fight of India's independence as a spiritual fight, as a fight for a cause which was higher cause, of a higher ideal, and therefore he looked inside and he also looked at the material world outside. Now, 2-3 things come out very important. During his term, he was part of the Congress, but he was in and out of Congress in some form or the other. It was like a tributary, taking a different course and then again coming back. When we talk of his vision, and when we speak about his vision, 1 or 2 factors are very important. One is that when he was the president of Congress, 1938. I'm not going into dates too many because that will take a lot of time. But between in the 30s, we come to a scenario where Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose was elected as the president of the AICC, and he was the president. It is at that time he set up a national planning committee, and he asked Jawaharlal Nehru to chair it. If you go through the notes of National Planning Committee, you get a very clear vision or clear view of Netaji's vision of free India. It was based on scientific temper. It was based on technology. It was based on various factors. 1, status of women in free India. 2, the development of India based on its own internal understanding of science and technology and values of its civilization. He never lost touch with that. 3, that India will be an industrial country. 4, India will have a socialistic pattern of society. Socialistic in the sense that it is not socialism per se as we understand, but his socialism was drawn even from Swami Vivekananda was a socialist in his way, in some of the ways, and therefore we find that in Netaji there is a very clear streak of these ideological formats tempered by the values of our own civilization and culture. This is very important, and we must keep that in mind. The next thing that comes up is that he was ready. He knew the limitation of this civil disobedience, and he knew the limitation of this peaceful movement, so-called, and therefore he knew that a new method has to be found. He went to garner what is called support from other countries, from other movements, especially as I mentioned to you earlier, but he never gave in. He also raised funds, but those were all loans. He said they will be paid back. But where do we find things happen? When he met Hitler, he examined. He wanted to have a very clear understanding of setting up an armed struggle against the British in India from outside to inside, whereas there was no support within the country. But his dialogue with Hitler and his dialogues in Japan are of great importance to us, because therein we find his understanding of dealing with the biggest what you call imperialism of its time, and how history would have to be molded to be able to bring freedom to India. Whilst talking to Hitler, he made certain assertions about India, and Hitler was not really not sort of coming out. Hitler was of the view that India will have to take a long time to grow out into a freedom, into a society which can fight for its freedom. But even though it took him 2 years to get to meet Hitler, he continued to work. He took stock of the soldiers, the prisoner of wars of the Second World War. He organized them. He set up Indian Legion. But of course, the Indian Legion didn't go far enough because Hitler could not muster up his forces to be able to come from the northwest into India. And he advised him to go to Japan. Now, please understand, here was a man who was in a foreign scenario, who had not known anything, but he was daring enough to take a submarine journey all the way to Southeast Asia, and then to Tokyo. What is of great importance is that in the life of Netaji, there were never a cool moment. During all his presence, during all his discussions, he remained very cool and serene. He was very respectful. He didn't hold any bitterness towards anyone. But it was very important for him to be able to make use of the situation and opportunities that were arising in those days. His coming to Japan is associating and taking stock of what had already been happening in the world through the movements of some Indians through the Gadar party, to be able to meet Rashbihari Bose in Japan and be able to organize the Indian National Army, even in the midst of Second World War, is something to reckon with. His coming closer to the Burma campaign with Japanese, and his moving into Imphal and his battle over there. I'm trying to cut short this so that we have time for question answer. And there we find that he is able to first set up what is called the regiments named after Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and himself. And he was the first one, far ahead of his time, to have a women's organization, a women regiment, and you have the Rani Jhansi regiment and the like of it. The fact is that such organizing capabilities in a man inspired by India's own spiritual heritage and civilizational values is something that we must nurture even today and take lessons from it. What those lessons are, we'll come to that a little later. But the fact of the matter remains that we do know that there was initial success, and the INA had its own failures because Japan had to surrender. The Nazis, also the Axis power, also lost. In all that, he was successful enough to set up the first provincial government, even before the fall took place. And if you hear his declaration of that resolution, is very interesting, because he said that this is that this will be the resolution in which we have cutting across caste, creed, religion, region, gender divides. It belongs to everyone in India, and it also belongs to the people who outside Indians who have joined, and therefore he was far ahead, and he had a mission in which there was no scope of thinking of partition and so on and so forth. But there was no support from within the country, and therefore Netaji had to withdraw. But that does not mean that he gave up. And INA may have suffered a setback, but the fact of the matter remains that Indian National Army, he said, will continue. And even after the Indian National Army soldiers surrendered, there was again a movement in India where to continue with the Indian National Army. Historians have described it in great detail. But what are the lessons that we are learning? First of all, he believed that we do not have to look back. He believed in a democratic republic. He believed in a liberal democratic setup, and he also addressed himself to youth. While addressing to youth, we find a lot of insights which come out. He said that we don't have to look to the West for democracy, because democracy has been part of Indian ancient times, and there was enough freedom in those days, and therefore we have to develop it. This is if you go through his speeches, you find this. Second is he said that the service of mankind was always the uppermost thing, and it was something which we had to reckon with. The third thing that he said was very important, that women must play a very active role, and therefore, and it is only now that we are thinking of women in armed forces, but he had them, and he proved them. They proved their mettle. What then is his vision? How do we look at Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, and why are we talking about him? And when we are talking of Amrit Kaal, well, both have certain metaphorical parallels. Both are drawn from the spiritual tradition of India. It has taken us a long time, but we find that in the contemporary times, when ideological frames have not been able to figure out and find a solution to the tortured soul of humankind, that we need to again gather ourselves together and work out a methodology. Will India, now there is a very interesting question, and the question is that India had all the making of an industrial revolution. Had industrial revolution come to India first, would we have colonized the world? Would we have shared with the world the new knowledge and the possibilities of material progress of the world in a collective togetherness? What then is that vision that we will have to address when we talk of becoming a Jagat Guru? Let me try to put together Netaji's vision and as we see things today. And I will put this vision together as an inclusive, fearless and non-violent society, bound together in the spirit of cooperation and service, based on scientific temper and technological progress, living in harmony with rhythmic energy of nature. With this, we take back and figure out between now and 2047, what are those key elements that we should be looking for? And the key elements and who are the main actors in this? The main actors in this whole episode, which is going to be a long historical episode of 25 years, are the young men and women of today and their offsprings. It is they who will have to carry this on their shoulder. They are the source of energy, the reservoir of energy, which is going to witness and be part of this great endeavor, and therefore a mission of the youth. What then would be that mission of the youth, and how are we going to deal with it? I will leave you at this point, and I would expect you to raise your questions so that we can carry this dialogue and come to some kind of a strategy for times to come. Thank you.
Saloni, we can have questions now.
Yes, sir. Students, I would request you to please put forth your questions through the chat box. As of now, we have a few questions. From English Journalism Amravati, Durgesh asks, two of the nation's great, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and Mahatma Gandhi, both had different approaches towards the same goal for achieving freedom. Also, we all know that thinking is totally different from each other. At this point of time in our society, where each individual has a strong opinion, how do we utilize every opinion towards the same goal of achieving betterment for our nation?
Good question. There will always be diverse perceptions about reality. And how did Netaji try to bring about people with the different backgrounds, different interests? It is if you share a vision and you take it as a mission, then you will find that it is possible to be able to work out on a baseline understanding and sharing of interests. It need not be congruent, it need not be identical, but as you have seen all militaries operate, like take for instance your own army, your own armed forces. There are people from all walks of life, there are people from different faiths and beliefs, but they are drawn together because they have a mission in front of them. And it is that mission which brings people together. And even Gandhi and Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, they differed in their approaches, but their goal was same. They certainly differed in their methodology of achieving it, the operations that they went in, but their goal was same. Even though Gandhi was a great person and so was Nehru, but we did not get what we wanted. In fact, today we have an India which is truncated India. A living civilization was amputated. I won't call it partition. Partition is a very polite word, but we were literally amputated. And did we eventually get freedom without violence? Look at the number of tragedies and lives that went. How many people got killed? And even till date, the formation, the aftermath of partition, what has been happening in the land which was supposed to have been created for a particular community or belief, Pakistan, it never became a place where Muslims could stay in peace. It became the cantonment state of the West. It remained a part of a superpower. And therefore, we need to again examine, are we going to be like the obtaining definition of superpower? And therefore, I think we need to look back, and it is very important that we have awareness about what are the implications of the manner in which we think. Of course, you have to be diverse. You can't be regimented into one way of thinking. A park, a garden is a very good example of many flowers blossom over there. India was never a country which was very much straightened out like a regimented marching troop or something. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Jitendra Gupta from Hindi Journalism Department asks, बोस जी के बरक्स गांधी और नेहरू को खड़ा करना कहाँ तक उचित है? क्या इससे उनके कद में कोई फर्क पड़ता है, जबकि बोस की आज़ाद हिंद फौज में रेजिमेंट्स का नाम ही इन नेताओं के नाम पर रखा, साथ ही बोस ही गांधी को राष्ट्रपिता संबोधित करते थे? यस सर.
आपने बड़ा अच्छा सवाल प्रश्न किया. Do you want me to answer in Hindi or in English? You choose. I can deal with that.
Sir, completely as you desire.
All right. Let's speak in both. It's something which we must take a lesson from. That Netaji disagreed with Gandhiji on many accounts, and yet he was never bitter about it, because the mission was same. Mission was the love for Mother India. Gandhi, in search of truth, exercising the leverage of truth. And Jawaharlal Nehru, again, a person who disagreed with Gandhi, and a number of times, as somebody has described it very, very nicely and very, very beautifully, that Netaji was a rebellious son, and Jawaharlal Nehru was more of a person who would reconcile, and who will go up to a point and then come back to Gandhi. It is not a question of lowering anyone. We are not, by talking about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, we are not lowering the standing of either Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi. But we can't also ignore the fact that where do we stand today? Can you imagine that India got truncated? The failure of, in the last 75 years, what have we seen? What did we gain? I mean, Gandhi and Nehru were great, tall leaders, but we got India partitioned, as they would call it. I would call it amputated. A living civilization got killed. And the people who are living in that land we call Pakistan are in total dismay. You know what is going on over there. And then they themselves could not keep themselves together, and you had the formation of Bangladesh. So when we come on our own, and for India to be able to survive, we are not going to be picking bones on this leader or that leader, but we will have to understand what strategy we should follow. Netaji was one person who also believed in military strength. And don't forget that it was Mahatma Gandhi who said that violence is better than cowardice. So therefore, we will have to be we'll have to weigh the words, and we'll have to weigh our views about the three people that we're talking about, and of course many others who are part of it, whom we don't talk about. आपको मेरे को लगता है ऐसा नहीं है कि यदि हम नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस को उठा रहे हैं, असल में इतने सालों तक नेताजी को तो दबा के ही रखा गया, हम शायद उन्हें भूल गए. In my own trips to villages and all, I used to find that you would find Netaji's portrait on a calendar or some kind of a statue somewhere. So therefore, Netaji disappeared from our life in physical term, in front of our eyes, but he became part of our mind. And it is that emotion called Netaji which we are examining today to be able to put to practice and move ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Priyesh Raj from English Journalism Amravati campus asks, what is the truth behind the death of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose? How did he disappear? What was the political scenario at the time of his death?
Okay, it's a very good question. It's a very good question, and which has many answers. But let me address this political scenario. 1945. The Allied powers had won this war. The Japanese had surrendered. Germany had also got truncated. Netaji had to withdraw, but he did not abscond. He was supposed to have taken a flight, but while leaving, his messages are very good. It's worth reading those messages which he gave at that time, that I am withdrawing now, but it does not mean that the freedom struggle come to a halt. And he even told the people to be in touch with Mahatma Gandhi. So it was a break, but it was not a breakdown of the movement. But don't forget that when Netaji left, about his, there are views on it. Some say that he died in a crash, but there are other views which indicate that when they asked the country, they said there was no crash, and it is left open as to where did Netaji go. We can of course spend a lot of time, and as you know, that facts, they say facts speak for themselves, but I don't believe facts speak when they are spoken to. And you are finding that contemporary historians are bringing these facts to the fore, where there are many question marks about the death of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. No, there's no clear picture. But one thing is coming increasingly clear, that he did not die in a crash. I can say that because after having read quite a lot on the subject, that is what seems to be what is going on. But the political scenario was what? That when the British in India were quite comfortable, the Quit India movement had failed. People were, everybody was in jail, and at that point of time, 1945, we had the fall of Burma, and it was that INA trial. Let us not forget that it was that INA trial which set the spark across the country. So whatever independence we did get, and the British were compelled to leave, were after the efforts of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Let us not forget that. Nobody is denying that Gandhiji was the first person who came and he brought a breath of fresh air and a people who were terribly tired and fatigued and were living in a slavery, straightened their back. But let's not forget the point that Gandhiji did not go far enough. We live with a partitioned India, and for India, for its own survival, it will have to again grow itself. Not the way to go back into past, but to have a different kind of influence and cooperation within the region, within the continent, and perhaps also for the world to be able to see. Because if we don't take action now, we are likely to be under a nuclear winter, or perhaps be at rest for all times to come. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Priya Raj from Hindi Journalism Department asks, जिस प्रकार सुभाष जी ने अपने कार्यों के द्वारा साहस, निर्णय, निर्माण का लोहा मनवाया, आज के समय में हम पत्रकारिता के विद्यार्थी अलग अलग तरह के दबाव से निपटने के लिए उनके गुणों से क्या सीख ले सकते हैं?
आपने जो प्रश्न किया, इस प्रश्न के अंदर ही सवाल और जवाब दोनों साथ साथ हैं। आपने कहा कि आजकल के पत्रकार जो अब कितने दबाव के अंदर आते हैं। पहली चीज तो ये है कि हम दबाव सहन क्यों करते हैं? शायद इसलिए, perhaps because we feel it is comfortable to make compromises. Why should a journalist is a big thing today, and given the media and the digital technology which is obtaining, you have a tremendous power, and I'm sure India will have to have a tremendous power to move forward with the digital technology and information systems. Yes, of course, you need to confer a lot. As a matter of fact, Netaji can become a rallying point for the young journalist, for all young professionals, for whether it is young scientists, your young engineers, your young entrepreneur, young farmers, to come together and understand where are we to go, or are we going to blindly follow the prescription given to us by ideologies which do not belong to this country. And you are raising a very fundamental point as a journalist. आपने जो प्रश्न उठाया है वो आजकल के काल का प्रश्न है। ये तो अमृत काल का प्रश्न है कि हम किस प्रकार अपने जर्नलिज्म से, अपने संवाद से समाज में परिवर्तन ला सकते हैं। इसलिए नहीं कि शायद हमारी जीवन में थोड़ा सा सुख आ जाएगा। सुख उसी को कहते हैं जो आत्मनिर्भरता और आत्मसम्मान से आता है। जो whatever you get out of compromises can never be considered prosperity and peace. It is a make-believe illusion. The sooner we get rid of it, the better it is.
Thank you, sir. A student from the digital media classroom asks, do you think Netaji's legacy should have been more celebrated?
Okay, how do you celebrate? Is Netaji to be reduced only for garlanding? And if you want to remember Netaji, then we must address his vision and update it, because we must understand the general direction of his vision was to promote. His was, see, the two books he wrote, they're a very interesting thing to see. Leave alone the contents, which are of course in their own way very inspiring, but the title he gave, Indian Struggle and Indian Pilgrim. It was a pilgrimage. That struggle was a pilgrimage, and that is how we look at the future in which we want to proceed. But please repeat your question once again. I want to address that question.
Yes, sir. Do you think Netaji's legacy should have been more celebrated?
Yes, you are right there. It's a very sad part. It's something which we need to contemplate. That how is it that we did not give Netaji the right place that he deserved in our lives, in our history? But you can't suppress the kind of character, the kind of value system, and the kind of pursuit that Netaji represent. That will come again and again, and that is the strength of our civilization. That is the strength of our culture, and that is what will constitute and must constitute, and we must come together to constitute the action plan of Amrit Kaal.
Thank you, sir. A student from Digital Media Aizawl campus asks, was meeting Hitler for help a right decision by Netaji, or has it been portrayed in a wrong manner in history?
I should be asking you this question because the new generation should answer this question, but let me deal with it. His dialogue with Hitler is very important. His firmness with which he dealt when he was in Germany is something to reckon with. He discussed it. It was a strategy. It was not as though he was ideologically fallen or something of that sort. It was a Chanakya Niti, if I would say that enemy's enemy is somebody you can work with. But tell me one thing: if you are going to question anyone talking to Hitler, let's say Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, what were we doing in India? Were we not talking with Allied forces? Who were they? Were they Indians? Were they lovers of India? Did they give anything worthwhile to India? This is something to reckon with. And then again, between 1945 till date, what has happened? The so-called doyens of human rights and the so-called doyens of whatever democracy and so on and so forth. What was Hiroshima, Nagasaki? What was Vietnam? What was in more recent times in Iraq? Where did Osama bin Laden was nurtured, and how was he nurtured? Which are these powers? The so-called fascism, the so-called isms that we are talking about are two sides of the same coin. Let's be very careful. Let's not fall into this trap, because we have to find our own path. And that is the path of India. And that's why I somewhere mentioned this, that would India, whenever it rises, would it like to become like the superpowers of the kind that we have today? Power to destroy is a superior power. I would have thought power to heal would be a superior power. In our parlance, these are asuric forces. Let us not follow that illusion. And this requires a lot of contemplation. And I'm sure we will start working, and I'll come to that a little later during the question as to how do we proceed further. But yes, he discussed with Hitler. He even talked to Japanese, but he made it very clear that India will be run by Indians, and it will be for Indians. There shall be no subjugation of India by any of these powers. So therefore, talking to Hitler, there's nothing wrong in that. You're just working out a strategy. Because how do you explain Rowlatt Bill? How do you explain Jallianwala Bagh? British were not dialoguing with us on how the freedom should come and when should you be free. Nothing of the sort. They were brute. Let us not forget that it was not Keith Shelley or Wordsworth of India who came to India. It was Robert Clive. We were dealing with a very, very brutal bunch of people. Brutality has been part of that civilization. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Jyoti Lal from EJ Kottayam campus asks, why do all the governments of India hide Netaji's events or confidential information from the people of India till date? When will the government of India reveal the truth?
Let's not look for anybody to reveal the truth. The truth will reveal itself, and as we see it is. Yes, of course. When we signed, when we got independence, we were to treat the INA people as prisoner of wars, as traitors, because we were under tremendous British influence. Permit me to say that even after we so-called came on our own in 1947, we have continued to practice the same patterns. Sometimes extension of the British rule in a more lighter form. Because here I would like to mention to you that Netaji was one person who had a very total vision. He also had a view of what kind of civil service India should have, not the ones which would be a pale shadow of the Indian civil service of its time. He also had a idea of Azad Hind Bank. He also had a lot of designs for India. So therefore, when we talk of Netaji, we are not talking of the Netaji as we have been told about him. There is much more to Netaji, and for which we will need to have this. Now must become a dialogue in the society as to what Netaji was, who he was, what he stood for, and how do we use Netaji's vision to proceed further. Let me be very frank with you on this. Netaji was no person who's shown as somebody who's bullet happy. It was not that. He was a very serene person. If you hear him, you will find, of course, the audios are available. He had a very straight voice. He had a very clarity of vision, and he was a great reconciler. Despite the fact that he had such opposition to Mahatma Gandhi, it is he who called him father of the nation. He always addressed him as Mahatma Ji. But of course, I disagree with you, Mahatma. That was he would say that. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Naman Jain from Digital Media IIMC Jammu asks, what is some advice from a military army perspective for personal development goals and endeavors as Netaji and you share the same defense background?
Well, first of all is that you must have, if I was to tell you, one is that you must be very clear about the objectives that you are going to address yourself in your personal life and in dealing with the surrounding around you. Second is discipline. When you talk about military, normally you think the military is a discipline as military, but don't forget the word discipline comes from disciple, and disciple is a guru and shishya relationship. So therefore, you must have an anchor on which you want to proceed. That clarity is very important. But the most important is what are you aiming at? What is your aim? And how do you work on that aim? And in that, discipline is a very important part. Physical, mental, and emotional.
Thank you, sir. A student from Digital Media Classroom asks, how did Bose become so eager to get India independent that he even joined hands with fascist forces like the Nazis and imperialist forces like Japan? In your opinion, what explains this, and also shed some light on how he felt when Japan occupied Andaman and Nicobar and committed huge atrocities in November 1943 before his disappearance in 1945?
I was expecting that question. That's a good question. See, tell me, let's first deal with fascism and the so-called other isms that were there. How do you see the the conduct of the so-called, as I just mentioned to you, the allied powers that came. I mean, how do you look at the superpowers of today? How are they different? I mean, I want to understand this. As far as I'm concerned, they fit into a very nice dictum that capitalism grew into imperialism, and imperialism as a last resort grew into fascism. Now look at your own free market economy. How free is your market, first of all? And where is that invisible hand? Today, you are governed by warmongering, the industrial military complex. How is it different? How, and in the final analysis, what is the outcome of all these isms? Violence, violence, and more violence. So why are we getting lost in this? That he went and discussed with the Hitler or something, and he went and met the imperialist power of Japan. But what was the British rule in India? Was it not imperialism? We will have to examine that. The problem is, and I share that problem, and for a long time I was part of the same belief that we lived through isms which were given to us by the West. We never tried to look inside our own civilizational memory and try to figure out, is there an alternative? Was there an alternative? And where do we proceed now? Are we going to remain dangling between these two isms and other isms that have come around with various combinations? As I mentioned to you, science was to be the language of freedom. But even today, science has become enslaved by the ones who finance it and direct their scientific knowledge. Where is technology? Look back in India for a minute. We went through pandemic. The world went through pandemic. We developed a vaccine. We shared it. Not that we had anything excess. There is some lesson in that. And when there are other big powers who turn around and, sorry, America first or so-and-so first, and then we shall see. But we did share. So there is something to look inside. Let us have our own education. Let us educate ourselves not in terms of the abbreviations and grammar given to us from outsiders, but let's have our own grammar of life as such.
Thank you, sir. Akansha Sharma from Amravati campus asked, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose resigned from the civil services to come back to India to help her regain independence. Unfortunately, his ideas were not supported by the people's leaders of that time. Do you think he would have been better off as a civil servant and would have been able to make more significant contributions towards the Indian society, which eventually would have made him one of the people's leaders?
Which civil servant has become a people's leader in the true sense of the word? Indian civil service, of course. There was no question. In fact, he answers this question to his father when they talked. He says this comes in direct conflict. Indian civil service under British rule was a British civil service. As a matter of fact, it was a service created to rule India. And please remember, even today, with due respect to all my civil servant friends, that bureaucracies are status quo masters. They are reluctant to change. And we need to create conditions where people can grow. And that is why you find, to some extent, it is true that Indians who go abroad do exceedingly well. Why is it that they don't do so well in India? A question to think about. And that is why Netaji himself, he did not join ICS, but he talked about an Indian service, a seva, which would have the seva as the central theme around which. So the complete training, orientation of civil servants, civil services would have to go through a change. These are some of the issues that we have to address between now and 2047. We'll have to bring about some reforms. But allow me to interject for 2 minutes, give me 2 minutes. How will this change come about? Nobody has asked me this question, so let me ask this question and attempt to answer. The ones who will matter the most are the ones who are the young men and women of today, whether they are young scientists, young engineers, young farmers, young entrepreneurs, and their offspring. And yet, we have to create conditions for their growth. We have to create conditions, especially for women, because one of the things that Gandhiji did was remarkable, that he brought women into the forefront of India's freedom struggle. That's a good thing. But of course, he had a different view about women. There was a limiting view, whereas Netaji had a complete freedom. He was very clear in his mind that there is no question of any bias in caste, creed, religion, region, gender, or language barriers. They are all Indians, they are all human beings, and they will move in the service of their motherland. So therefore, it's very important. The first thing that we will have to do in our pursuit and attempt at becoming a Jagat Guru is to organize our youth force in the country. Mission of the youth, as I would call it, which is my pet subject, which I'll deal one of these days. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Manas Ranjan from IMC Dhenkanal campus asks, पाश्चात्य सभ्यता हमारे समाज की गहराई तक घुसकर धनजन का संहार कर रही है. हमारा व्यवसाय, वाणिज्य, धर्म कर्म, शिल्प कला नष्टप्राय हो रहा है. नेताजी अगर आज जिंदा होते तो ये सब देख के बहुत बुरा लगता उनको. इसीलिए जीवन के सभी क्षेत्रों में पुनः मृत संजीवनी का संचार करना है. यह संजीवनी आज के अमृत काल में कौन लाएगा?
बड़ा अच्छा प्रश्न आपने किया. You raised a very nice, interesting question. More and more of an observation. We live in a scientific world. But science क्या है? विज्ञान, विशेष ज्ञान. ये हमारे लिए कोई नई चीज तो नहीं है. ज्ञान पर ही तो हमारी सारा धरोहर है. अब आपने जैसे कहा कि वेस्टर्न सिविलाइजेशन का हमारे ऊपर इफेक्ट है, ये सच है कि है. ऐसा नहीं कि सब चीजें वेस्टर्न सिविलाइजेशन की खराब है, कुछ चीजें उनकी भी ठीक हैं. वेस्टर्न सिविलाइजेशन की अपनी प्रॉब्लम है. अगर आप देखें तो let me tell you that this whole concept of nationhood, the relationship with nature, the post-industrial revolution development of organizations and institutions gave us a very high ego sense and a kind of separation. Whereas this flows out of classical physics. I mean, those who have been a student of science would understand that there it was all a Newtonic Cartesian, atomistic model. And as science itself has grown right up to Einstein, and subsequently, we are now talking about holism. We are talking about that there is no such thing known as being isolated and you can be on your own, and therefore you are part of a larger whole, and your interaction, your behavior, your pursuit interacts with other and affects others, and therefore we have to find a kind of spirit of cooperation and service, and to understand that we are part of a larger creation, larger possibility, and a larger potentiality. Now this is where, when you start thinking like this, then you are transcending the boundaries, the national boundaries, the profit motive boundaries, the military boundaries. Many boundaries will have to be transcended. And if India has to be the lighthouse of freedom or the Jagat Guru, it will have to address that. And that is what was our heritage also. So जैसा आपने कहा, वो आपने प्रश्न सही किया, लेकिन हम भूतकाल में भी नहीं रह सकते. Neither denial of past nor its repetition can lead to progress. New patterns must emerge, but they must be linkable from the past. Past could be a fountainhead in which we can look back. And our knowledge, what came through our sages and seers, and if you look at that, there also, Valmiki would have been a scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. We have created these divisions. We must start looking at each other as human beings, even in all forms of life, and we'll start finding a kind of self-confidence and a kind of a life agenda which will emerge in us.
Thank you so much, sir. Iqbal from Urdu Journalism Department asks, देश की आज़ादी में जितने भी लोगों ने अपना योगदान दिया, उसका एकमात्र उद्देश्य देश की आज़ादी था. लेकिन क्या आपको ऐसा नहीं लगता कि आज इतने साल बीत जाने के बाद उनकी विचारधाराओं के खांचे में डालने की कोशिश की जा रही है, राजनीतिक दल अपनी महत्वाकांक्षा के लिए स्वतंत्रता सेनानियों का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं।
राजनीतिक दल ही रहेंगे। राजनीति के बारे में बहुत कुछ कहा जा सकता है। राजनीति शॉर्ट साइटेड, विजनरीज आर वेरी फ्यू। एक नेता की जो दृष्टिकोण होता है, या जिसको कहते हैं कि his perspective and his vision is next 5 years. Life today requires a very long-term vision, and all politics put together cannot address it. That is why I am talking to the young men and women. I am not talking to the politicians. There are great politicians. There are great statesmen. They are there at all times. It is not as though politics is something outlawed or dangerous. But yet, yes, politics world over has a very narrow vision. That's why where we are where we are. So, आपका कहना भी ठीक है, but are we wise enough and brave enough not to fall into these traps and be able to find a furrow for ourselves and move ahead? That is the challenge for all of us, for all of you, more so for you, the generation after mine, because you are going to face the future. You have a very great stake in the future. Your analysis may be right, partly right, but then are we going to fall into that trap? Why do we must know where to cull out the essence from the maze of ideas and slogans and so on and so forth.
Thank you, sir. A student from the ADPR department asks, Netaji was a great military leader. What would be your take on the latest Agniveer Yojana according to his ideology?
Say your question again. I missed out something.
Netaji was a great military leader. What would be your take on the latest Agniveer Yojana according to his ideology?
Okay. See, as far as Agniveer Yojana is concerned, it's an evolving concept. But there is nothing wrong with it, because you are training a large number, a considerable number of young men and women, young men largely, into a military training, into a discipline training. They are being exposed. As a matter of fact, it is good that these people are being trained in military skills, because you will need, when you come out, first of all, military is not all fight alone. Military is not violence alone. Those who have served in military would know that it is a particular way of life. It's also like an ashram life, which is a regimen. You go through an ashram, you have a regimen to work with, and therefore, I personally find that it's an interesting exercise that is being carried out, but it will have to evolve. It's just the beginning. Many more things will come, and of course, young men and women will have an exposure to military life, to the borders, to wherever it is, and I'm sure they'll come out as more chiseled citizens. It is not as though those who are not in the military are not chiseled citizens, but it's a good thing. It is a kind of a public school training, because I don't think in 5 years they would be ready to fight a war, to go into operations, but yet they will have some kind of indoctrination, if I may use the word, but rather orientation towards a more organized way of living.
Thank you, sir. Ashutosh Kumar from Hindi Journalism Department asks, संवाद का विषय है अमृत काल और नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस की दृष्टि। अमृत काल से आप क्या समझते हैं?
देखिए, अमृत काल अगर हम यूज करें इन अ टिपिकल आवर ओन संस्कृति की विचारधारा से, तो इट इज दैट ऑस्पिशियस मोमेंट वेयर you take forward a mission which is noble in nature. But as we are using it today in the common usage, Amrit Kaal is a timeline between here and 2047, 25 years. And it is not as though by saying this, we have reached there. And what is it that we want to see ourselves at the end of 25 years? But you may like to ask this question before we deal with Amrit Kaal. Why are we talking of Amrit Kaal now? What is it that makes India, or what is it which makes us so confident or so involved that we should be talking about Amrit Kaal? It is. If you look around in the world today, there is no clear path. There is more confusion. Wars have become much more, vigorous, and there is no clear path ahead of us. It is India to which everybody is looking at. Even economically, we are performing better than most countries in the world, and even otherwise, we are finding that there is more, stability in our own country, which of course must be promoted to a much greater extent if you want to be a lighthouse of freedom for others. And you'll find that there is turmoil everywhere. You look at in our own neighborhood, you look at China, look at what's happening in Russia, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Europe, the energy crisis, what's happening even in America and other places. And Africa, of course, is a place where we need to be, the humanity need to hang its head in shame. But the fact of the matter remains that recently we have also started talking. For a long time, India has been dealing with the rest of the world not as a conqueror, but as someone who shared and did business with in more equal terms. You take, for instance, India is now heading G20. It's something that we must be concerned about. We must know more about it. What is the leadership of G20? What does it mean? What are its molds? What are its programs? How it's going to take us into future? And India is also doing something even greater. It's about getting the group of the South 120 countries of the Southern Hemisphere, and what we call the South, which is supposed to be underdeveloped. And this is a mission India has. And it is not a mission as though we are condescendingly doing it. We must not lose sight of the fact that it is in India's own interest that it must stand up erect. And when standing up erect does not mean to make the world subservient, but to bring up to the level of becoming co-travelers in the journey of and ceaseless adventure of man, as so to call.
Thank you so much, sir. Aditi Chaudhary from IIMC Jammu campus asked, after inaugurating the Kartavya Path and unveiling the statue of Netaji, Mr. Modi said in the development of Kartavya Path, India of the future of Bose vision is achievable, added that the energy on Kartavya Path will give people a new vision and a new belief for India. In this digital world, how far this vision of Bose of socialist ideology prevails?
In this world of digital, in the world of digital systems and digital technology, things move very fast. Things move faster in artificial intelligence, and there are many more things. It can move very fast. But what do we understand by socialism? That's very important, because it's an evolving concept. These isms, if we doctrinaire them, then we are a loser. Then we are fundamentalists. We have not moved forward at all. The issue is we can use these isms, but let's not get caught in these isms. Let us talk of ideals. Let us talk of tasks. That will be perhaps a better way of looking at things. Yes, of course. As someone said once, when we talk of socialism, we talk of state control of means of production and distribution. But it is not that. Mere state production. You need regulations, but that does not mean that you cluster any growth or anything, because isms have failed everywhere. You tell me, where are these beliefs of the 19th and 20th century today? Whether it's your free market economy, it has been hijacked by your industrial military complexes, where they want war. Your market is nothing as the marketing of arms, the leading market. Some more than $65 billion have already been spent in Ukraine. I mean, which ism are we talking about today? And therefore, when we let us talk of dharma. And dharma is not mere religion. Dharma is our role and responsibility. It is time for us to start thinking differently. We need a new mindset. We need a new paradigm within which we have to look. So, of course, digital technology can be of great help, but all technology is a double-edged weapon. Unless even science for that matter. And interestingly, at this point, let me also say the development of modern science in India, of course, Ramanujan and all were there earlier, was a dialogue between Swami Vivekananda and Jamshedji Tata. And that's how we got what I have in my town, Indian Institute of Science. So we have to be very careful about it. Science and scientists have moved as objective seekers out after truth, but they do so not by sitting in ivory tower. We must have some kind of guiding light, and that is your spirituality. That is your civilizational knowledge that is living. Those are your civilizational memories that we must live with. It is not as though we want to go into past, but these are the headlights and beam for future.
Thank you, sir. Pratyaksh Dubey from Jammu campus asks, आज के भारत को देखते हुए कृपया नेताजी के विशेष नजरिए से अवगत कराए. यदि नेताजी के बारे में उनके बारे में और जानना हो तो कौन सी किताबें पढ़ सकते हैं?
नेताजी ने खुद 2 किताबें लिखी हैं, उनमें से एक तो इनकम्प्लीट है, his own personal biography, India Struggle and India Pilgrim, these 2. But recently some very good books have come, like Netaji, The Man India Missed the Most. One is that. Then there are a series of lectures by contemporary historians on life of history. Those are books over there. And yes, there is. In fact, the more we will have a dialogue on Netaji, the more Netaji's facts will come to fore, and there is no book which can completely describe Netaji, but these are indications and arrows, and we have to use our own Maloom and our own national genius to be able to arrive at the importance of Netaji's vision and how do we act on it.
Thank you, sir. One last question from Deepak Dubey.
Sorry?
No, sir, there was some disturbance. One last question from Hindi Journalism Department by Deepak Dubey. महात्मा गांधी और बोस में मतभेद होकर भी मतभेद नहीं था. गांधी जी कभी हिंसा को नहीं चुन सकते थे. आज के समय में इस तरह का समन्वय राजनीति में नहीं देखा जा सकता. इसके क्या कारण है?
जिस तरह हमने अपनी राजनीति को ऑर्गेनाइज किया है, वो परिस्थितियां हमारे सामने हैं. And to put it in a different form, we would need to have these reforms. But where do these reforms begin? They begin right from our education policy, right from our what you call electoral reforms. That's very important because money has become a very powerful influence in decision making in politics, and this is it. And then the most important is, if you want to straighten out the politics and many things in the country, is the young men and women of the country. We must organize the young men and women. We must get organized ourselves and have a dialogue and debate, not merely a pursuit of career alone, which is a very big thing. In fact, we have got very major problems of livelihood, so on and so forth. But yes, it is the youth of the country which will have to come forward to be able to say that this is not the way things are going to be. But then we have to be very careful on that, because we must be aware of our own history, our own heritage. If we are not, then we are a pale shadow of someone else. Alienation is built into our pursuits then. So therefore, मेरा कहना आपसे यही होगा कि हमें अपने आप को संगठित करना होगा, एक kind of awareness जागृति लानी होगी, और इस जागृति का नाम ही, और इस जागृति के अंदर ही हम नेताजी को पाएंगे.
Thank you, sir. Just one last question from the Kottayam campus by Jyotilal Netaji's grandnephew asked the government to rename the Indian Army as Indian National Army. What would you say about this?
Well, it is Indian National Army, of course. I mean, it is Indian National Army. I mean, it's simple as that. It's Indian Army is Indian National Army. But if you are trying to say that it should be on the line of Netaji's vision, well, you will find it very interesting that the Indian National Army of Netaji had, there was no this thing about gender or caste or anything of that sort. How could he do that? We need to learn lessons from that. Can you imagine that Indian National Army of Netaji, had it moved further, where was the question of a partition? Netaji had a vision of right from east right up to Afghanistan, and he had his followers everywhere. So, well, the Indian National Army today, Indian Army today is a national army in its own form. In its own form, I have no problem with calling it any name, but the character of the army, as you know, it has proved its mettle. In fact, after had Netaji been alive, then I'm sure Indian armed forces would have been utilized in many more ways. To just give you an example, you know, we spend millions of dollars in getting armament. Of course, now we are changing slowly. We spend millions of dollars and millions of rupees in training our armed forces person. Do you know that most of them, something to the tune of 60,000 of them, go back home between the age of 38 to 42 every year? 38 और 42 साल की आयु के बीच में 20 साल के एक्सपीरियंस के बाद ये लोग अपने छोटे घर, टाउन्स में चले जाते हैं. We don't utilize them. And do you know, they are the ones who are running your armed forces with the state-of-the-art technology. And when they go after 20 years, they are either senior instructors, trainers, supervisors in every field, whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it is digital technology, whether it is information technology. You name any technology, it is there in military. You see, when you next time look at Republic Day Parade, you have a look. What kind of technology is at display? Who is manning it? Who is maintaining it? And who is using it with military precision? Your own people. Do we utilize them? Why are they not there? Skill India is only, can you imagine this country which has got a demography to be proud of, has got only 4.7% skill index, whereas South Korea 97%. We talk about demographic dividend. We are never able to bring together and organize the ex-armed forces people with our youth force. It would be beautiful to see that happen. Nothing, and it will be a very, very, very productive kind of a thing. And do you know that in forward areas, some in hilly areas and places in Kashmir and other places, your soldiers also help the local farmers. So it is not as though army is only cantonment based. Armed forces can be part of social life of a country in more than one way, and can serve very well and show an example. So that's it.
With this, thank you very much, sir, for such an insightful deliberation and generously answering all the questions. I would now request Mrs. Bhavna Acharya, Assistant Professor, IMC Dhenkanal Campus, to kindly propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Saloni ma'am. A very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bhavna Acharya, Assistant Professor, IMC Dhenkanal. At the outset, I want to first thank DG Professor Sanjay Dwivedi sir for organizing Friday Dialogue on such a regular basis for over 2 years now. And then I want to thank Dr. Pramod ji for organizing such Friday Dialogue seminars in a very fruitful fashion. And now I would like to thank Veteran Squadron Leader Vikram Desh sir for giving a deliberation on Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose spirit and his ideology and connecting the dots to Amrit Kaal. I'm very privileged to offer the vote of thanks on such an occasion because of the connect of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose to our state, that's Odisha. He has had a long connection. He had a long connection with Odisha during his days. And for now, I can just remember the poem of Gopal Prasad Vyasji titled Khuni Hastakshar. I remember in our school days, we used to read this poem, and I was at that time we never understood the gravity and the importance of the poem. But now I think that poem resonates so much with as an adult. So, and I'm sure all our students must have gotten a very valuable lesson and must have learned a lot more on Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Thank you so much, sir, for your deliberation. And thank you all the faculty members. Thank you to all the students for having a fruitful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.